A lone morning wind moves across the empty plains of eastern Mongolia, brushing through the tall grass like a quiet warning. The land is wide, flat, and ancient, a place where the horizon feels impossibly far away. But on this particular day, in 1939, the silence carries something else. A rumble, low at first, growing, spreading. Until the earth itself begins to tremble, horses scatter, dust lifts, and steel tracks carve new scars into the soil. Japanese armored cars roll out of the haze, engines growling, silhouettes sharp against the rising sun. Ahead of them, Mongolian border guards adjust their rifles, unsure if this is another probing raid or the start of something far larger. From a distance, Soviet advisors watch the frontier with narrowed eyes. They have seen these movements before. Small clashes, skirmishes brushed aside by both governments. But this time feels different. The Japanese are moving with purpose, with confidence, with the belief that this remote stretch of grassland will bend before their advance. In that moment, the world doesn't realize it. But the opening spark of a hidden war has just been lit, and it will shape everything that follows. By 1939, the world was already teetering on the edge of global conflict. Europe had felt the shockwaves of Hitler's ambitions, and in Asia, Japan had been carving its empire through China with brutal efficiency. Yet far to the north, in the windswept expanses of Mongolia, another struggle was unfolding, one largely forgotten by history. The Mongolian People's Republic, a small nation sandwiched between the Soviet Union and the advancing Japanese Empire, had become an unlikely front line. Its plains and hills, though seemingly empty, were strategic corridors that neither Tokyo nor Moscow could ignore. Mongolia itself was a young state, forged from decades of tribal alliances, revolutions, and Russian influence. Its population was sparse, its infrastructure minimal, but its geography was crucial. Control over these borderlands offered access to Manchuria, the resource-rich region Japan had seized and transformed into the puppet state of Manchukuo. The Japanese Kwantung Army, seasoned from campaigns in China, saw Mongolia as both a threat and an opportunity. A testing ground for armored tactics, mechanized infantry, and air support in terrain that seemed, on paper, remote and inconsequential. On the other side, the Soviet Union recognized the stakes. Stalin could not allow Japanese influence to creep unchallenged toward Siberia. His response was methodical. Advisors, tanks, aircraft, and skilled officers were sent to train and organize Mongolian forces. It was a delicate balancing act. Direct confrontation with Japan risked a broader war, yet inaction could mean losing a strategic buffer zone. By mid-1939, both sides had committed enough forces to make clashes inevitable. Small raids and border incidents escalated, testing both nations' resolve and setting the stage for a war that would be as much about survival as it was about pride. The summer of 1939 arrived with tension thickening the air over the Mongolian plains. Japanese patrols probed deeper into the borderlands, their presence increasingly bold, supported by mechanized units and air reconnaissance that pushed the limits of their supply lines. The Mongolian forces, though vastly outnumbered and less equipped, relied on intimate knowledge of the terrain. Horseback mobility, hidden ravines, and sudden fogs of dust became their allies. Every ridge and river crossing was mapped and memorized, every pass a potential trap for the advancing enemy. What the Japanese saw as empty steps, the Mongolians knew as a network of living fortifications. The Soviet advisors embedded among the Mongolian troops brought more than just weapons. They brought strategy and modern tactics. Armored formations were deployed alongside cavalry, anti-tank guns hidden in folds of the landscape, and small air units conducted reconnaissance to counter the Japanese advances. Coordination between Soviet instructors and Mongolian commanders was meticulous, turning a lightly armed population into a surprisingly resilient force. The stage was set for a confrontation where agility, intelligence, and sheer determination could outweigh raw firepower. By August, skirmishes were erupting along the Khalkhin Gol River. Japanese detachments testing Mongolian defenses were met with ambushes that combined Soviet artillery precision and Mongolian knowledge of the land. The clashes were sporadic but intense, producing a pattern of attack and counterattack that would escalate into a full-scale engagement. Neither side could afford hesitation. The Japanese were determined to secure the border and expand their influence. The Mongolians, bolstered by Soviet support, were fighting for survival and sovereignty. On these wide, silent plains, a hidden war had begun, one that would challenge assumptions, rewrite tactical thinking, and leave a mark far beyond its remote location. The human dimension of this conflict was stark. On the Mongolian side, men and women, often barely trained, faced an enemy equipped with modern tanks, artillery, and planes. They rode on horseback across scorched grass, carrying rifles and dreams of defending their homeland. Fear was constant, but so was courage. Messages relayed between squads were shouted across valleys or delivered by riders galloping through dust clouds. The soldiers' eyes carried the weight of generations, a quiet determination that the open plains themselves seemed to acknowledge. Each clash left visible traces, abandoned camps, scorched earth, and the echoes of those who would not return. The Japanese soldiers, meanwhile, were trained and disciplined, but far from home. They advanced methodically, measuring every ridge, every waterway, every Mongolian maneuver. Exhaustion gnawed at them, not only from the terrain, but from the constant threat of ambush. Their morale was tested by a foe that was invisible until the moment of attack. A ghostly presence that struck and vanished, leaving confusion and casualties behind. Both sides endured long nights under harsh skies, listening for the whisper of enemy movement, acutely aware that survival hinged on every decision. Tactically, the battle was a study in contrasts. The Japanese relied on combined arms, coordinated infantry, armored vehicles, and air support working in concert, and they attempted encirclements, probing for weak points, confident in the power of mechanized warfare honed in China. Mongolian forces countered with mobility, sudden strikes, and intimate terrain knowledge. River crossings became choke points. Hills became defensive bastions. Every ridge could conceal artillery or a sudden cavalry charge. Strategy was less about numbers and more about precision, timing, and the unpredictable nature of open terrain. Technology shaped much of the conflict's outcome. Japanese tanks, though fewer in number than their European counterparts, were fast and mechanically reliable, supported by motorized infantry and light artillery. Their planes, reconnaissance fighters and bombers alike, dominated the sky when weather allowed. But the Mongolians, with Soviet guidance, used this technology against them. Anti-tank guns hidden in ravines, camouflage nets over supply convoys, and small pockets of mobile artillery created an environment where superior firepower could be neutralized by clever positioning and timing. Even horses, seemingly archaic, became weapons of mobility, moving troops and supplies faster than wheeled vehicles across the rough steppe. Enemy perception played a silent role. Japanese commanders underestimated Mongolian resolve and overestimated their own ability to dominate. They assumed open plains favored mechanized forces. Yet each advance met unpredictable resistance. Mongolian ambushes, combined with Soviet-trained counterattacks, introduced chaos into Japanese calculations. Morale wavered when tanks bogged down in mud or units were cut off from support. Conversely, Mongolian troops grew confident, proving that determination and adaptation could level the playing field against a technologically superior foe. Leadership proved decisive. Soviet officers like Georgy Zhukov, quietly observing and advising, influenced every major maneuver. They coordinated artillery barrages, armored counterattacks, and airstrikes with precision. Mongolian commanders, relying on both instinct and training, made split-second decisions to exploit enemy weaknesses. Each choice could mean life or death, victory or retreat. The chain of command, though tested by geography and communication limits, functioned with ruthless efficiency, turning a small, under-equipped force into a formidable opponent on the field. Morally, the war revealed harsh realities. Civilians lived under constant threat. Herds were scattered, homes damaged, and resources strained. Yet a sense of purpose bound the defenders. They were protecting not only territory but identity, culture, and independence. Even the Japanese soldiers, conditioned to obey and conquer, faced a moral dilemma confronting an enemy who fought not for expansion but for survival. In these remote plains, the lines between strategy, technology, and humanity were blurred, each shaping the conflict as much as the other. The decisive moment arrived in late August 1939, along the winding course of the Khalkhin Gol River. Days of probing attacks, skirmishes, and artillery exchanges had escalated into something far larger. A confrontation that would test every soldier, every tactic, and every piece of equipment. The Japanese had launched a concentrated offensive, seeking to break Mongolian defenses and secure the border. Columns of tanks rumbled across the plains, supported by infantry in tight formations. The air above hummed with reconnaissance planes and bombers, casting long shadows over the advancing troops. Mongolian forces, now fully coordinated with Soviet advisors, had anticipated this maneuver. Artillery positions were concealed behind ridges. Anti-tank guns were dug in along likely approaches. Cavalry units waited in folds of the land, poised to strike once the enemy's advance created gaps. As the Japanese tanks crested a hill, shells tore through their formation, forcing units to scatter. Smoke rose, mingling with dust kicked up by the fleeing horses and vehicles, and the attack, once confident and precise, devolved into confusion. Communication lines faltered. Commanders shouted over the din, adjusting tactics on the fly. The human element became painfully clear. Soldiers faced the sudden, shocking chaos of modern mechanized warfare. A single well-placed artillery shell could halt a tank, a cavalry charge could cut a supply line, a hidden sniper could disrupt command. Mongolian riders moved like shadows, striking swiftly and melting back into the plains. Japanese infantry struggled to maintain formation under fire. Each moment stretched into an eternity, with lives hanging on split-second decisions and the unforgiving terrain. The battle had transformed from a test of advance into a grueling trial of endurance, strategy, and nerve. By the second day, the scale of the engagement became fully apparent. Japanese forces, once confident, now faced an enemy who refused to yield. Mongolian and Soviet coordinated artillery struck with precision, targeting armored columns and cutting off reinforcements. Air support attempted to regain control of the skies, but anti-aircraft fire and sudden maneuvers from hidden positions forced pilots to fly higher, reducing effectiveness. The plains, open yet treacherous, became a labyrinth of traps and counterattacks. Leadership decisions shaped the unfolding chaos. Soviet advisors directed reserves to exploit weaknesses, while Mongolian commanders anticipated every flanking attempt. The Japanese, stretched thin and disoriented, tried repeated assaults only to be met with disciplined resistance and relentless counterattacks. Tanks bogged down in mud, infantry units isolated, communications broken. The once orderly offensive dissolved into a struggle for survival, each side pushing the other to the brink. The climax arrived when a concentrated armored push met the heart of Mongolian resistance. Artillery thundered, horses charged, and soldiers moved with a deadly rhythm perfected over weeks of preparation. By one, Japanese advances faltered. Exhaustion, confusion, and relentless pressure broke their formations. By the time dusk fell, the battlefield was littered with the remnants of mechanized power, scorched earth, and the exhausted figures of defenders and attackers alike. Victory had not been easy, but Mongolian resilience, strategic foresight, and Soviet collaboration had turned the tide. The hidden war, fought far from the eyes of the world, had reached its turning point. The aftermath of the battle revealed both the scale of the engagement and its hidden significance. Japanese forces, forced to retreat across the plains, had suffered hundreds of casualties, lost tanks, and disrupted supply lines. Their confidence, built on previous campaigns in China, was shaken. Mongolian troops, though exhausted, counted their dead with grim acceptance, aware that even small victories came at a steep human cost. The plains bore the scars of conflict. Craters from artillery, burned-out vehicles, and trampled grass where cavalry charges had swept through strategically. The battle reshaped the region. The Japanese advance into Mongolia had been halted, and their plans for expansion northward faced a formidable obstacle. Soviet involvement, though initially advisory, had proven decisive. The deployment of tanks, artillery, and coordinated maneuvers demonstrated the effectiveness of modern combined arms tactics in open terrain. Mongolian forces, previously underestimated by Tokyo, emerged as a credible defensive partner. Their knowledge of the land, combined with Soviet training, had neutralized an enemy far superior in equipment and numbers. Morale on both sides reflected the consequences of the fighting. Japanese troops returned to Manchukuo with caution, aware that even mechanized superiority could be checked by terrain, preparation, and determination. Mongolian soldiers, riding across the silent plains now littered with debris, felt a sense of vindication and pride. The people of the region, though still vulnerable, had witnessed their homeland defended against one of the most advanced armies in East Asia. In the broader context of 1939, this engagement remained largely invisible to the world's headlines. Yet its impact would echo in military strategy and regional geopolitics for years to come. In the weeks that followed, the Mongolian plains slowly returned to their quiet rhythm. But the echoes of battle lingered. Survivors moved among the remnants of destroyed vehicles, spent artillery shells, and abandoned supplies, piecing together the story of what had occurred. For the Japanese, the retreat forced reassessment. Commanders in Tokyo and Manchukuo recognized that the northern frontier was not a simple corridor to exploit. It was a contested space where underestimation could be catastrophic. Lessons in terrain, mobility, and enemy resilience were carefully noted, informing future campaigns in East Asia. The Mongolian-Soviet alliance gained confidence. Coordination between cavalry, artillery, and armor had been tested under fire, proving that even a small nation, with proper guidance and knowledge of its land, could resist a modern mechanized force. The success was not measured only in territory held, but in the demonstration of tactical evolution, a lesson in adaptation that military planners on both sides could not ignore. Yet behind every strategic calculation lay human cost. Bodies buried, villages affected, families displaced. War, even in these remote steppes, exacted its relentless toll. In the larger sweep of history, this confrontation remained obscure. European and Pacific theaters dominated headlines, while the war Mongolia fought was largely invisible, its significance overlooked. Yet for those who had been there, the battle became a defining moment. Soldiers, advisors, and civilians alike understood that survival was a combination of courage, preparation, and sheer endurance. The Khalkhin Gol engagement was a crucible, a testing ground for tactics, leadership, and human will, and it quietly reshaped perceptions of what small nations could achieve when determination met strategy. The wind blows again across the Mongolian plains, carrying with it the memory of men and horses, of steel and fire, now long gone. The grass grows over craters and scorched earth. The river flows as it always has, indifferent yet constant. For a fleeting moment, the world seems at peace here, but beneath the calm lies the echo of choices, courage, and loss. The battle may have been hidden from history's spotlight, yet its lessons endure. In the quiet, one can sense the resilience of a people who faced overwhelming odds and refused to yield. The plains whisper stories of strategy and sacrifice, of unity and adaptation, and of a war that proved that even the smallest nation could shape the course of events through resolve and intelligence. Time moves forward, yet the spirit of those who fought remains etched into the land itself. And so, the story of Mongolia's forgotten war endures, not in headlines or textbooks, but in the rhythm of the wind, the sweep of the horizon, and the enduring truth that courage can echo far beyond the battlefield.